It's been a weird year for Team Green and Xbox, but when it comes to Gamescom, Xbox delivered, and there's no doubt about it. This was my first ever Gamescom, and you felt Xbox's presence as soon as you set foot in the building. It was crazy. From big posters on the wall to taking up half of an entire hall with the Xbox booth, and just such a plethora of titles to go and either see, watch, or experience. Xbox delivered at Gamescom. I made a video the other day about everything that I played at Gamescom, but there was so much from the Xbox front that I wanted to make a whole separate video talking about that because all the dominoes, and we've been saying it for time and time again, they're starting to line up for Xbox now. You're getting expansions to games that are already on Game Pass, you're getting brand new first party titles into Game Pass, and then the whole PlayStation 5 and ports, that's a conversation for another video. But I wanted to talk about what I played and experienced and saw at Gamescom because, like I say, there was a lot from Xbox on the first party front. So there's a couple of different aspects to this video I want to talk about. I want to talk about the stuff I played, so that's Towerborne, that's Diablo Vessel of Hatred, and then there's the stuff that I saw in presentations, Indiana Jones, Starfield Shattered Space, and Avowed. I want to start with Avowed because I'm not typically the Obsidian RPG fan. I didn't really vibe with the Outer Worlds, and I'm not too keen or familiar with the work prior to that, other than KOTOR 2, right? So I went into this Avowed presentation where they ran us through this quest, thinking, okay, like, I'm interested to see kind of where this vibe is going. And I came out of it really impressed. Now, whether that was because my expectations were a bit low, because I didn't really expect to like it, maybe, but what was on display here, it looked pretty good. I quite enjoyed the action, like the action seemed quite fast and frantic, and the way you could dual wield the wands and then swap back over to your sword, and how that was kind of both ability based with what your companions can do, and also what you can do, and how that can factor into ranged enemies, to close up enemies, to boss fights, for example. But I think when it comes to Obsidian RPGs, it's the replayability of it and also the choices that you're making in your mission. So this one mission where you're looking for this missing expedition and you come across this guy, right? And all of a sudden you just start to see all these branching paths open up. Now, whether that be origins of your character, open up a new dialogue, or actually exploring the mission and finding the optional stuff in there, which can then either expand the mission or completely change the outcome of it, of what you can ask and what you can do. And I was quite impressed with Avowed on that front. It definitely looks like an Obsidian RPG, and I mean that in a nice manner and also not in the best of ways, in that the combat at times, it looked a little stiff, but I don't think you ever played these RPGs for action-heavy combat. It looked serviceable, and what I saw from both the characters that were in this demo and the actual action itself and the boss fights and how the paths diverge and all the different outcomes, I was quite into it. More into it than I thought I was going to be. And I came out of the presentation, which was around half an hour, thinking, okay, like, the delay seems the right move for now, but also I'm quite excited to get to that when it launches in February. So as a quest, as one like, vertical slice of the game, which is very difficult to demo, I was really into it. I think Avowed is the one thing I would say is that it didn't do anything that made me go, I have to play that. But it did enough to where I kind of went from, I can skip Avowed to, you know what, I'm quite interested in this game right now. So yeah, Avowed, I'm looking forward to seeing more of that in February. So sticking with surprises, something that took me back a little bit was Towerborne. So I spoke a little bit about this in my other video, but Towerborne is a side-scrolling action-adventure game. But the playability of it, like, it was really fun to just get hands on the controller, and it had this gorgeous art style and the side scroll nature of it. But this looks like a really good time with friends. I think about like the kind of beat 'em ups of like the TMNT Shredder's Revenge, those kind of games, like you just sit there, you play cooperatively, and you have a good time. But there seemed to be quite a bit of depth with Towerborne. I just played with a random person and we just had fun. Like we just jumped on the sticks and we were just having fun, mashing our way through enemies. And even in again these like small vertical slices of games, it seemed like it had a good amount of depth to it. Whether that was going to be playing as different characters, whether it's going to be the replayability of the missions, bosses, the enemies, or how the gear system is all going to work, I think Towerborne is actually shaping up to be a really good hit. So it's also an interesting one because it's going to be launched on Steam in early access in November and then hitting Game Pass at a later date. And that's apparently a move that Stoic, I believe, the people who are making this, wanted to make. So fair enough. And like, I think this is a game that is well suited to early access, but I think this is a game that, but when it does hit Game Pass, I can see it being a massive hit actually, because it's got that family friendly nature of it, but it seems to have the depth to then keep those more engrossed players around for longer and keep them replaying missions and earning new stuff. And yeah, like, I was surprised for how much I really did enjoy Towerborn, and this is definitely one that has shot right up my interest to the point where I might even get it on Steam Early Access because I just really had a good time. You know them video games where you just jump on, you play, you don't really think too much about it, but you can just feel yourself having a good time, and Towerborn was one of those. So going back to the presentation side of things, there was a double look at Shattered Space, the Starfield expansion, and Indiana Jones. I want to start with Indiana Jones. Now, did I go through Cologne Airport looking like an idiot just so I could bring this hat home that they gave out for free with me home? Yes, I did. But it's also a testament to how good Indiana Jones does look. If you're going to Indiana Jones for the same kind of Wolfenstein combat that you had from machine games before, I don't think it's going to deliver for you. Indiana Jones is looking and shaping to be a much more cinematic experience with a lot more puzzles, but the puzzles look engaging in the way you can use your camera to kind of get a bit of lore or use it to take snapshots and give you more clues, and how the puzzles were all integrated throughout the levels. And it does have that kind of cinematic flair. It's got that presentation of the movies to it and the old school kind of feel. A little bit how Star Wars Outlaws right now is shaping up to have that same kind of direction of the original trilogy. I do think that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is going for the more of the same thing that machine games are trying to tie that to the movies. And I think they're doing a pretty good job with that. So in the presentation, we got to see a bit more of a look at combat, a bit more of a look at puzzles, but also how there's going to be that open world and there's going to be side quests and all that. So it doesn't seem to be a fully fledged open world game, more like little zones that you can dot off around and find little secrets that will then lead you to side quests or treasure or things that you can pick up which will be valuable resources for yourself. And again, like going back to the combat, like it doesn't ever seem like it's going to be a case where like it's 10 on 1 in the same way that Wolfenstein was. It looks like you'll be getting into punch outs and maybe with 3 on 1, and the way you'll take a whip, you can whip him, you can pull him down, and they'll lose the gun so they don't shoot you, which then means you can go and batter the guy next to you, knock him down, and by the time the other guy's up, you can then go and take him out. So it just looks really fun, really cinematic, and it's one of those games where I left the demo and I was like, okay, like this looks interesting in a different manner to what you would expect from that kind of immersive single player first person game. So yeah, Indiana Jones is definitely one to keep an eye on. And I came away again just very impressed by the small little presentation that they did show with that game. On the flip side of that presentation, we got the Starfield Shattered Space look. Now, I got to Starfield quite late because when it first released, I was on holiday and I came back to it at a later point. And honestly, I had a good time with Starfield. It has many, many flaws, do not get me wrong. In the handcrafted areas, that sense of exploration, the quests that you had available, some of the characters that you met, Starfield did deliver on that kind of fantasy that not many video games can provide out there. And with Shattered Space, to me, they're doubling down on everything that I loved about Starfield. It was the handcrafted locations, it was the sense of and what and why and who. And what they're looking to do is provide that kind of like darker depths of space. Like what happens when we take technology too far? And one of the things that was mentioned in the presentation was that they're going for like the kind of horror close quarter combat. So in Starfield, a lot of the time it's just shootouts from afar and you get a couple of close quarter enemies. With Shattered Space, they're going for a lot closer quarter combat and enemies charging at you, but also there was like light horror elements in terms of mysteries to unpack. And I was just all about that because that to me is like some of the more interesting aspects of space. Like what is out there? What are the dangers? And are we our own worst enemy when it comes to technology and how that advances? And again, like they've just dropped the vehicle in there. So I'm interested to see kind of how that is integrated into the overall design for this DLC. It all takes place on one planet, which you can leave at any time. So Starfield's DLC, I think, is going to deliver on what the base game had, just without that mass exodus of like procedurally generated planets. Like, I think Starfield is at its best when it's handcrafted Bethesda content that you go out and do. So I'm really interested to see kind of how that works, how the close quarters nature combat works, and maybe some new weapons in that. And the planet that you go to or the area you go to is gorgeous to look at. Like, it has those kind of dreamy space vibes to it. And yeah, like, I just loved looking at this area, this space, this planet, whatever it is. And I think a story with a mystery to uncover, and it's to do with House Haroon. So it is the more mystical depths of where they're going with this story. So I think Shattered Space is going to be a really good time. I think it's going to improve on what Starfield got wrong and really double down on the stuff that it got right. And I think that's going to ultimately lead to a good expansion. A few last little tidbits. I did speak about Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred a lot more in the other video because I did a little comparison with Path of Exile 2. But again, Diablo 4 is in an incredible spot right now. It's just getting better and better and better. And the expansion itself, again, looks like it's just going to double down on what it gets right with a new class that I played. It was a lot of fun. And Diablo 4, like, it's a better time than ever to jump into not just Diablo 4, but Diablo as a franchise. And I think that team, now that they're kind of just buffing the kind of all the classes and making you more powerful, making that experience a lot easier to get through rather than a grind, Diablo 4 it's in a great place. But yeah, I think overall it was a massive Gamescom for Xbox, because ultimately, if Xbox hadn't showed up to Gamescom, it would have been really lacking. It really would. No PlayStation, no Nintendo, and it is a quieter year for video games this year. There's no doubt about it. It's a lot quieter. It's a lot more calm. So Xbox showing up really helped deliver a fantastic Gamescom. And they had this World of Warcraft ride, which was like this. I think you strapped a MetaQuest 3 on your head, and then you put earphones on, and you'd get on this like wagon, and it would move. And I'll put a little bit of on screen for you. And like, even that, I was like, wow, well, no pun intended, but Xbox has World of Warcraft now, and it's like, do I want to play World of Warcraft? Like, Jesus, this is crazy. So maybe I will. I don't know. But I think Xbox as a brand had a huge showing, not just in terms of booths and areas, but like, oh, we've got a stacked end of 2024, and we've got a very bright beginning of 2025. Not to mention, they've still got things like Doom the Dark Ages, Fable, and South of Midnight all slated for 2025. So I think Xbox as a brand are looking really strong for the next 2 years. Will they deliver? Look, that obviously the jury's out, and like I said, the whole PlayStation 5, that's a conversation for another video to talk about. But as a brand, as people putting video games out, I think as an Xbox fan, you should be excited at what they are putting out. As a video game fan, you should be excited for what Xbox are putting out. So yeah, I think Xbox had a really interesting Gamescom that was important, not just for Xbox in terms of putting themselves out there, but for Gamescom itself, because without them, I'm not sure it would have been the same event for people to go and experience and play those kind of games. So yeah, the only thing I was upset about is that I didn't get to play Replaced, because that game looks fantastic. But apart from that, Xbox had a really, really strong Gamescom. But now I want to ask you, like, what do you think? Like, what are you most excited for from Xbox in the next couple of months, even the next year or so? Like, is towerborne on your radar at all? Like, if it isn't, is it now after I've spoken about it? Out of all the expansions that they got going on, do you have anything there? Like, I didn't even mention Call of Duty. Like, I would have loved to play Black Ops 6, but obviously they have the COD Next event. So I think if you're a Game Pass subscriber, this next 6 months are going to be stacked. And I didn't even mention Stalker 2. I didn't get to play that one. Like, is there anything from Xbox that they had at Gamescom, or maybe they didn't, that you're just really excited for? I know the long-term one for me is definitely Blade, but we'll get there eventually. There's a lot of games to release between now and then. If you enjoyed hearing my thoughts, dropping a like on the video is appreciated as always. And hey, like, I just love talking about the things that I'm really passionate about, and I love when it comes to video games. So if you enjoyed that and you want to hear more of that, consider subscribing. I'd love for you to stick around. Other than that, all my socials are linked in the description down below, so you can get at me down there. I hope you have a fantastic day. Look after yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.